Welcome to our seminar on resilience. Okay, we're recording now. Again, hello everyone. Welcome to our seminar on resilience, thriving in the face of chronic stress. We will wait just a few minutes. I think people are getting the links now, some of them. So for others to join us before we get started on our own time together. I think it's 12:05. We can go ahead and start. Again, hello. My name is Alfidar Iltebir, and on behalf of the Uyghur American Association, as well as our partners, UHRP and Campaign for Uyghurs, I want to welcome you to this month's Holistic Wellness Seminar with the Uyghur Wellness Initiative. Our purpose in this place is to offer compassionate support for the Uyghur population in the face of the current difficulties in our community. And if this is your first time, we welcome you. Today, we have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Paul Bunge, practicing internal medicine physician and hospitalist, who also has a master's degree in leadership with a focus on counseling and a broad range of experience in crisis situations around the globe. Dr. Bunge has a holistic view of medicine for the whole person, and he is here to share with us from his professional experiences about how to recognize the effect of stress in our bodies and how to help us match our potential for physical and mental health balance, even when we are facing experiences of great challenge. So, Dr. Bunge, we look forward to hearing from you today. Welcome, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Alfred. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah. Thank you for letting me speak, and hello to everyone. If we can have my slides, I just have a couple of slides to show. Okay, so the as she said, as Elfstar said, yes, I've been a doctor for 20-ish years and several roles. I did spend between in the various systems in the U.S. military medical system for about 18 years, and then many volunteer roles overseas as well. I do not have personal experience of, being a refugee or persecution or any of this. I don't, pretend to have, really understand, what people here have or may have gone through. I will not completely understand people's feelings and experience. But I do have some experience with other folks that have had difficult experience, and I've seen a lot of cases. So that said, I want to talk about a couple of cases that are interesting. This one, Khalid was fairly basic, not basic, but not uncommon, unfortunately. He was a refugee from Syria. Met him in a Greek refugee camp. I did work in the medical area there. In Syria, his house was bombed. He was just trying to make it through the civil war. His house was bombed, and then people ran to his house and videotaped him when he was all upset and complaining about the government, and that he knew immediately he had to leave the country, which he did, and took his family. When he saw me, he was addicted to many medicines, benzodiazepines, sedatives, had chronic anxiety. His daughter would not, very difficult for the young daughter to leave the tent because these sounds and things would make her just cry and be scared because she thought something's going to get bombed. She's going to get bombed again. So it was not this kind of anxiety and stress, and just going to the doctor with anxiety was pretty common, but still very difficult, very difficult to manage and deal with. He became quite a friend actually after a while. I'll mention in my background, Paul Tournier is, I would say, an influential impact on me. He was a physician in Switzerland, and saw the connection between the psychiatric and things that are happening in the mind and what may come out in the body. And he had a thesis that all physical problems have some sort of emotional and spiritual component. And I think he was a kind of a pioneer in that field, which, although we talk about holistic medicine, is a field that's really not very advanced, I would say. But he's a great resource if you're ever looking for a book. Another guy is, not a refugee, actually somebody who did not have obvious, traumatic experience or something that stimulated him to get a medical problem, but his problem is still very interesting, right? So John was a 37-year-old, and these are not real names, 37-year-old person that I met in clinic, just a normal, smaller town guy that worked with a forklift. And one day it seemed like the forklift jolted. It wasn't really a major thing. But after that, he started to just having more and more problems swallowing. So he could not swallow. Then that got worse and worse, where he's just very uncomfortable swallowing. Eventually, he got weak. He quit his job. He lost over 30 pounds. Every time he ate, he would have to stand by the sink. He couldn't eat with his family. He just little sips by the sink. And he went to many, many doctors, right? ENT doctors, gastroenterologists, neurologists, everybody, which you can do in the American medical system. It seems like you could do this rotating, specialists, because that's how it works. He just was very frustrated. So his dentist called me. His dentist couldn't do his dentist was a friend of mine, and his dentist couldn't do his dental work because he just would gag and choke whenever he opened his mouth. And he said, "Hey, can you do something for this guy?" So I talked to him on the phone, and then I saw him. We had a free clinic at the time, and I said, "Oh, just meet me at the free clinic." And I just spent a lot of time listening to him. I didn't do very much for him. I just listened, mostly to his frustrations with the medical system, because his thing was, this medical system is unjust to me. It's not doing what I need it to do for me. And after he got all that out and we talked some more, finally talked about, there may not be an underlying physiological solvable problem that's causing this. And once he realized that, he said, "Oh, well, I can work on that." So he went home and he just taught himself to eat again. And he didn't really need a counselor. He didn't need me anymore. He just sat down and said, "If this is the problem, I have control of this." And he did it. Took him a long time, but he got back to a normal job or better job, and gained weight and did not need a feeding tube or any more medical things. So I bring his point up to say mostly that the body does weird things, and that the mind and the body are of course very connected, and sometimes not very well explainable. So traumatic experiences, acute and chronic, have many emotional and brain effects. Again, this is not a very advanced field. One example of a very obvious thing that we did not know before, except we all know, I mean, in the English, at least, you say somebody may have died of a broken heart. We always used to think that that's not possible. That is just something made up. But in 1990 in Japan, they described a situation where a series of cases where the heart became very weak and there was only emotional causes, like somebody died, somebody's relative died, or something that was very emotional, and it was quite dramatic. And we see this now. Now we have described this. We see this very frequently, actually. It's called Takotsubo's cardiomyopathy, and it's very clearly emotional connection. And it's like the heart is broken. It just almost doesn't beat at all sometimes. Very, very weak. And it can be temporary. And of course, generalized anxiety has been associated with coronary artery disease and other things. But those are just a couple of medical examples. So when it comes to chronic, this is a picture I have for you. Can anybody, and you may have heard this story, this picture before. Can you hold a glass in your hand? Alfadar, I'm sure you can. You can hold a glass in your hand like this, right? Nobody could do that. So there she's got the bottle, right? So she got the bottle in her hand, no problem. Anybody can do this. It doesn't cause you stress. It doesn't cause, now hold it like that, exactly like, now you don't have to do this, but hold it exactly like that for 8 hours and don't move. Well, that's a different story, right? It's a very different story. And that is what chronic stress does to your mind and your emotions. If you can't take a break from whatever that thing is, even if it wasn't that hard to do, or you think, oh, hey, I have no problem doing this, it can be like that. It can really start to damage your muscles, damage you. And just taking a break, putting it down in between and learning that process of taking a break can be very helpful. So remember that glass picture. So there are many, many, of course, traumatic experiences. Sometimes people don't even think of them. They maybe think of as normal life. There are violence, sexual assault, death, loss of home, loss of security, loss of autonomy, loss of moral compass. That situation where, hey, I used to think I knew what was right, but now I don't know what is right. And that's a kind of a stressor, right? Loss of hope, physical trauma, disease itself, and loss of meaning. These are all things that can be trauma in our bodies and our minds. Anxiety symptoms, there are many common ones, and sometimes it helps to know them. A lot of people know, but not everybody, right? So I've seen in American thought process, there is a commonly association, but in a lot of cultures, a lot of places don't really make this connection. So if you're in your musculoskeletal symptoms, you could just have tight muscles, can't relax, your neck muscles are all tight, you get back pain, headaches. If somebody comes up and asks you a question, you go, and you're just very, very on the edge, we call it. In your heart, you can have fast heart rate, rapid heartbeats, you feel hot or cold and flushing. In your gastrointestinal symptoms, your mouth can be dry, you can have diarrhea or stomach aches, lump in your throat, nausea, vomiting, urination frequency in the bladder. And in your mind, of course, you can be dizzy, lightheaded, have tingly fingers. These can all be just basically anxiety as the cause. Short of breath, sweating. But sometimes you don't know, right? So if you're short of breath and your chest pain, well, you might be having a heart attack, or you might be just stressed. There's just by the symptom, you actually don't know. But like I said, these are the common ones. I pulled this from a medical text, but there are, like the guy who couldn't swallow. It seems like anything can happen, really. And it can be tricky. It can be difficult. These are some of the common anxiety disorders that are listed in our current categorization when we think about general anxiety. But some people can get phobias, right? So the girl who couldn't go out of the tent could be agoraphobia, meaning afraid of crowds, afraid of people, or just afraid of some specific thing, like can't fly in an airplane, or yeah, and then substance induced, people take substances like marijuana or different drugs or alcohol, or prescription drugs because they have a stress. But sometimes those things can become the primary problem after a while, or at least be contributing to the problem. So, of course, the body, mind, and spirit are very connected. And this this slide is just to say just a few things specifically about this. If you have trauma and your stress does not necessarily doesn't mean you're crazy. It also, when you have a trauma in your background, doesn't mean it's your fault. Trauma can be very complex, a lot of different facets of your life and society. You may experience medical symptoms, but the medical symptoms still, like I said, still could be a medical problem that needs help. It is okay to ask for help from, doctors or counselors or both. You have choices. Like Viktor Frankl said, nobody can take away your choice to have meaning. He was in a concentration camp, um, and he said, everybody have troubles, but you still have your choice to maintain meaning and find meaning. There are a lot of resources out there. Still, you are your best resource, your inner yourself and what you can find inside. And you need to find what makes you feel secure, and people like this community group that people who have like-minded experiences, that could be very helpful. There's always a more healthy and a less healthy way to respond, and finding those balances is a lifelong process. It's okay to take it slow. And also, the last thing to remember is that we have our reactions to stress and trauma and defense mechanisms. And sometimes those can be unhealthy, and then we need to get over them. But sometimes they can be, we need them right now, right? If some person has to avoid some meeting or some group or whatever, they might need that. And forcing them to come out can help them, but sometimes can also contribute to their problems. So we have to be very careful. I want to move on to just discussion very quickly, but just to mention a couple resources. Because I was in the military system during the Gulf Wars, not saying those were useful or not, what I want to point out is the resources that the Army medical system developed during that time actually quite useful. So resiliency resources from the military, you could use those even if you're not in the military, you don't have those exact problems or they have stressful situations. This is very helpful. So they're kind of their 6 approaches: self-awareness, self-regulation, optimism, mental agility, strength of character, strength of connection. And they have actually a lot of this stuff is available online. And so they're not limited. So you can just go there and look for resources. So that can be a very useful thing. I'll skip over that. Healthy steps, like I said, we have good choices and not as healthy choices. Some of them I thought, learning, exercising, eating healthy, taking breaks. Don't forget, like I said, with the glass, having a supportive community, doing art, work actually can be very helpful, but in a balance. Care for others. I just talked to somebody, and he said, it's actually helpful to do a work that's helping other people. That seems to help me too. Taking breaks, looking for meaning and transcendence. So I have a whole list of others resources we may be able to put up online. But those are my basic thoughts. And let's see. Wanted to talk more and just ask questions and see what your experience and how this might apply. I'm sure there are people out there who have had symptoms and have wondered, is this a medical problem, or is this is this a psychological problem, or is this the trauma? What is happening to me?
Thank you so much, Dr. Bunge, for sharing that with us. I would like to share a little bit of my personal experience on this. we were complaining, we were talking about the assimilation, discrimination that Uyghurs were facing in our homeland, East Turkestan, for years, decades of, uh, work, and we were trying to survive. However, this increase during the Urumqi massacre in 2009, and then it was like a roller coaster, come down a little bit again. And starting 2015, 2016, one by one, our relatives, loved ones, family members deleted us from the WeChat, WhatsApp looking communication tool. And we had no connection with our relatives. And then we heard one by one our loved ones were disappearing, detained. We didn't know what was going on at the beginning. We were very, curious, cautious, and concern. And then we heard what's going on with the camps. Of course, China denied at the beginning, and then after the satellite maps, and they said those are educational schools, we are re-educating Uyghurs. Even at that time, I think we were a little okay, but still searching for more answers to our questions. But then once camp survivors shared what they went through in those camps, that was very unacceptable, unbelievable. It impacted all of us because every Uyghur family has a members in those camps. So starting 2018, 19, we were getting all those information, and it impacted all of the Uyghurs in the diaspora, not just our loved ones back home. And then we started to have this guilty feeling, survivor's guilt. And with that, also, some people try to speak out about the truth. However, then the transnational repression started, that Chinese government hold our family member hostage and trying to control our action here. Like, don't post that, don't say that, don't go these political activities or events. And then the too much pressure, and we had the dilemma of speaking out or keep silent. And it was a very hard decision for every Uyghur, because if we speak out, we might pay the price. Our loved one may pay the price. If we don't, we may not be able to save them. They will think no one is making noise for them, and they can do whatever they want to do, right? Chinese government. So that was the hard time. So going back to my personal experience, I was constantly reading those news, trying to catch up with the media, and then talking to the camp survivors in person, hearing their stories. I didn't realize I was such a positive, happy person, throughout my life. And then I started to have this shortness of breath type of problem, can't sleep at night. The more I talk, the more it hurts. I want to stay strong. Yes, we are victims, but at the same time, we're survivors. I want to tell the world, tell the Chinese government, you cannot silence me. We're still strong. We're going to continue to our fight for our freedom. But at the same time, the weakness inside me is why no one is helping, why the world is not reacting, why we are not taking it the next step. So many things going on, and my breathing problem got worse and worse. And one day I just couldn't breathe. And I was thinking, I was like always like, I kept doing that. And then I told my husband, drive me to emergency. I can't breathe. I'm not getting enough oxygen. And when I reached the emergency, they told me that you have plenty, like 98% oxygen. You're fine. Like, you need to wait. And I'm like, then what's going on? And they told me you're having panic attack. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I never saw a psychologist. I'm a very positive person in the house. I always trying to find the bright side of things. And I don't think I'm having panic attack. They said, yes, because what you went through, you keep suppressing, like, now it's hitting you physically. And that's when I realized that I cannot keep going this way. At the same time, it relaxed me a little bit, because I thought I will have shortness of breath and I will die. And that
Right.
made me more scared. And I was keep breathing in again and again, trying to get more oxygen. But what was happening, so I'm sharing this so maybe others are experiencing the same thing. I was actually getting too much oxygen when I kept breathing like that. So doctors told me, no, you won't die. You will just faint and then your body will adjust. And I'm like, so I don't have to worry about it. And the doctor said, no, you do need to worry about it. Yes, you won't die, but if you keep going this way, you are sacrificing your health. And then I realized that I need to find a solution. And for me, spending time with my kids, or like I sleep very late when everyone is sleeping. I go to my daughter's bed and hug her and kiss her. That kind of things gives me the energy and inspiration and keep going. And then when I see people happy about a little bit, when their asylum case is approved and they call us like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm now, my status is clear. That gives me kind of happiness and satisfaction. And also what gives me inspiration for keep going is when I see a non-Uyghurs, not just Uyghurs, all Uyghurs are suffering and they're trying their best, but when I see non-Uyghurs, Americans, Europeans, Canadians, and others like you, Dr. Bangi, helping for our cause, trying their best to help us just because they're human and they care about humanity, that gives me hope, that gives me the inspiration, and I keep going. And I hope I can keep going this way. But that was my experience with stress and all this. I was going through so many things, even though I feel like guilty of not spending enough time with my kids, because I'm
Mhm.
trying to help others. So all those feelings. So sorry for a long story. But with Uyghurs, what we experience, so I want to go with the first question, and I'm also going to monitor the chat room for other questions from our listeners, viewers. And by the way, we are going to record this and share the PowerPoint slides as well, and the video, whoever watching this. So my question is, what do you recommend? What do you suggest? The first question, how to explain all this to our children, because they are also going through this suffering, right? Because I remember my daughter at night when she was 6 asked me, "Mommy, will Chinese police gonna come and arrest us here?" And I told her, "No, we are here in the U.S. and it's not gonna happen." And then one time, my son told me, he was so young, he watched the movie Black Panther. And then after that, Mommy, why can't we ask help from Wakanda people? They protected their country. Maybe they can help us to save Uyghurs.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
had tears in my eyes, but it's impacting kids. So they are also thinking, because they don't see their relatives, they can hear their relatives' voice. They compare themselves with their classmates, like why our life is different than ours. And it's hard to explain it to them. I don't want to tell the whole story to them, the severe level, but I want them to know also a little bit and not to worry. So what do you suggest,
Yeah,
how
no,
to handle this
that's a very
crisis, the
important.
genocide, the crimes against humanity, how to explain this to, how much information is good for the kids?
No, that's yeah, well, you're kind of answering your question when you're asking it, which is good. It is a very difficult one with children because you want to balance several things, which is what you mentioned, right? So you want to balance on the one hand making sure that they feel safe, secure, and loved, and that's important. So things to do on that end is reassuring, like you did, and say no, things will be okay. This is why we're safe. And it kind of depends on the child too, right? So different kids are very different. Some kids need a whole explanation from A to, I have one niece, she needs the whole explanation from A to Z of everything you're doing, and then she's okay, right? But if she doesn't get that explanation, she's very nervous and whatever the thing, going for ice cream, doesn't matter. It's got to have the whole explanation. Um, but some kids, they just want the quick version, right? So it depends on the kid. Some kids, you give them this whole explanation that might stress them out. And so in fact, some kids, you try to explain to them and they just run away from you because they don't want to hear any of this stuff. And that's okay. That's their defense mechanism. They don't want to hear it. They want to run away from it. That's okay. So what you do in that situation, just give them the very minimum, but wait, because they will come to you sometime when you're not expecting it, with the question, like your daughter, am I going to be okay? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? So that's it. Then you're ready. You have to be ready, because what you're doing as an adult is you're carrying a lot of that for them. Whether you know it or not, whether you're willing to or not, you've got to carry that for them, because they're kids and they can't handle all this stuff. And so you don't maybe don't show them some video of some horrible thing that happened. You see it, you don't show it to them. You wait, and you give them little bits that they can take. And kids have defense mechanisms built in. They know how to block things out, and they're quite much more resilient than we think. And a lot of the things that we like in the modern psychological fields, we want to tell, okay, make sure you bring all this stuff out, bring this stuff out, bring this stuff out. But maybe we do it a little too much, right? So we gotta, if a kid needs that little defense mechanism, it's okay. Let them have it. If they believe in Wakanda for a while, if they need to believe in Wakanda, don't just burst that for them right away. Just, it's okay. Let them have their whatever they need at that time. And I think the most useful thing is to just know that you're there, that you love them. You, the adult, they can go out and then they can come back. You're there. They go out, they come back, you're there. And having other adults around too that are secure and kind of don't have that are not dangerous, that are not always, going off the deep end, maybe in their mind, having some adults around just so they feel that safety. Those are some things. But I think, like you said, you're concerned for them, you love them, you hug them, you show them. The other thing is just like anybody, everybody has to tell their story, just like you're talking about telling your story about, hey, I went through the medical system, I was all short of breath. Sometimes they need to tell their story, and just let them tell their story without judging them, without, jumping on them and correcting them. Just let them tell it, or draw their pictures or whatever. If they're ready and they need to tell their story, just let them tell it. And if they need to tell it tomorrow, let them tell it again. If they need to tell it the next day, let them tell it again. That's just general, everybody with a traumatic experience. Usually people run out of when you're telling your story, you often run out of people listening, right? People get tired of listening. They're very nice and they listen, but then after a while they're tired of you. and being able to just listen again and again and not judge, that's also very useful. Those are a couple thoughts, but it's not easy with kids, because you want to have that balance. You don't want them to be ignorant and not know who they are. And you need to tell them who they are and something about themselves and their history, but you don't want to overdo it. So you have to balance.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Yeah, it's hard to raise the kids and also, work on this cause. Even now, like this past couple weeks, we had so many events, so many projects, and I am still having a little bit of that shortness breath thing, and I'm telling myself, during the New Year's we're gonna be a little more, relaxed, and most likely we'll have a little bit time to recover. So I'm gonna go to our chat room to see other questions, Doctor. So here one says, how do we know when our physical problems are caused by stress versus when they are from our bodies, like more physical? It costs money to go to the doctors, and if we are under stress, should we wait longer to see a doctor?
Well, that's another one that's no clear answer. There's no absolute right and wrong to this one. We were talking about this just before the conference, actually, but it's so you have to find a balance. it's okay to go to the doctor. Sometimes you have to. If they're very clear, like I had that list of things that are very clearly anxiety related. I'm 30 years old. I'm female. I don't smoke, and I get some chest pains only when my kid is driving me crazy. Okay, well, okay, so that is clear stress. Okay, you're not having a heart attack. You can use relaxation exercises. You can do some things, but if it's a question, you have to go to the doctor. And but if you go to the doctor with that question, that helps, because if you go to the doctor with the I'm having a heart attack. You go to the emergency room and say, I'm having a heart attack. That's going to cost you a lot of money because that's where they're doing, it's America, okay? It's going to cost you at least $3,000. It's going to, going to many, many tests. But if you go, let the doctor do the worrying. It's helpful to manage your doctors, right? Let the doctor do the worrying about that part. That they're supposed to be the experts in this. Say, I, what do you have? I have pain right here. When does it happen? Only happens then. Oh, and what makes it worse? What makes it better? Trying to focus on that and let them worry about what it is. And then if you wonder, you say, hey, doctor, do you think this is more likely my stress or more likely my heart or more likely my other problem, whatever? That also helps them and gives them the freedom to say, yeah, it's probably stress, because they feel obligated. Once you come in the door in the American medical system, they are obligated. They feel very obligated to make sure you don't have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And there's almost no end to that list of things that they can look for. So if you keep going back, they're going to keep looking for more and more things, and it costs you more and more and wastes you more and more of your time. So you kind of think about it in terms of, do you think this is more likely my stress or more likely my physical body? And if you can get into that, yeah, it's more likely stress, then you can kind of tone down the doctoring, because the doctors they will not stop looking for stuff. And so you have to help them say, oh, okay, it's okay. I understand this is my stress. You can leave me, I don't think we have to do the 14th test. That's where we get into problems with our medical system. There's always risks, but you have to manage that. So I would say some balance. Okay. There are people who don't like this is a difficult issue. And there are people who refuse to deal with it. Okay. So they either go to one side or another, say, I don't have stress. You, doctor, need to fix my problem. That's one extreme. The other extreme is everything is in your mind, and the only problems in the world are the back is not aligned, or I don't have enough right natural chemicals in my body. And we go to the extreme on maybe Chinese medicine or chiropractor or whatever wholeness, wellness things. Those are extremes. So the best way to go is to kind of go in the middle and say, hey, we could have this problem, we could have that problem. Let me sort through it and work on the stress at the same time. The other thing is, whatever your problem, say you even have cancer or you have something else, it still doesn't help to always be worried and stressed and overworking and all that stuff. It's still helpful and healthy to have a balance in your life. Take some breaks, do some exercise, do relaxation exercises, which can be very helpful. And I put some resources on the slides. Deep breathing exercises, just clearing your mind, praying or meditating. These things, even if you have a medical problem, those things are helpful, right? So either way, you should, work on those things. Take some time, take a break, maybe need to go to the beach for a few days, whatever it is, it's okay.
Thank you so much for that, because it was one of my questions. What else to do to relieve from this stress? And yes, praying is another thing that helped me actually to relieve a little bit, because you repeat what you're going through and you ask for uh, forgiveness for what you do and then ask for help. So another question I'm going to ask you is, how do we plan for the long term? while we're going through this trauma and stress. This is a long road, and are there any life rhythms or practices that can help us keep from burning out? So you already mentioned some of them, but
Right.
in a long run, to live longer, let's say, not to lose our mind, what else do you suggest?
Well, I would try to draw on resources of people who are good at this. Um, I think there was one. I've worked a lot in hospice, so end of life care as well. So that's also very difficult. If you do that every day, all day long, it can just really wear you out emotionally. But I noticed one nurse was very good at managing her long term um, management of a kind of chronic thing that's not going to go away. Like if your job is hospice care and all your patients are dying, that's not a short-term thing that you can fix. And her what I noticed in her is that she did not do two things. The two problems that people have in long-term stressful situation is you either you quit because it's too much. You could do that, uh, or you become very hard-hearted, right? You just like, these people don't matter to me anymore. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to take care of these dying people, but I don't really think about it. I don't really care about them. And that's one way people do it. And it's harsh, but that's how people manage that. I don't suggest that. But this person, I noticed in her case that she did it long term, and she did not become harsh and hardened in her heart. And so I talked to her about it. She still doesn't know what I'm talking about, because for her, it's just kind of natural, you know. And there's a few people like that. But I noticed, and we talked about it a little bit, a couple of the things she does is when she's fully present with the person in that situation, but when she's done, she relaxes. She get in her car, she goes to the person's house, she takes care of the person. But when she gets in the car, she has a ritual every time where she just turns on the radio and thinks and stops thinking about that issue and that person and that problem. And that's her way. I can't do that. I have to kind of think about it when I'm driving away and process slower, but that's her way. So everybody, you have to have some way of holding the glass and putting the glass down. You have to alternate between those two things if you're going to do a long-term stress and still have your heart involved. I think you got to do some way of doing that. I think Viktor Frankl, the concentration camp, how could he, for several years, and how did he maintain his positivity? Like Alfredar said, I'm a positive person, where's my, how do I keep this? And he kept writing, and he would help other people with their positivity and say, how, even though this is hard and there's no explanation for this, there's no hope here, this is a nightmare, but nobody can take away my decision to have hope and positive thoughts on this. It's just amazing that way. And even other people finding their meaning, helping other people finding their meaning. So somehow to balance that. And everybody's going to have their different things, and you've got to experiment. What some people really, exercise is their thing. I have one doctor friend, she just wakes up an extra hour early and goes to the gym every day. That's how she maintains. And for me, it's a mix of prayer and community and reading. I like reading. Some people, it's just watching sports, or or going out with friends, doing something else. You have to watch. Some things are not as healthy, like I said, over distraction, some addiction, because they lead to addictions, because you can never get enough of them, with alcohol or whatever it is, something good. You just too much of it. So I think those are some of the long-term things. It's not easy. Long-term work that is stressful and emotionally stressful and morally stressful. You have to realize, I think that's another thing to help here. is the various kinds of suffering that you're experiencing, right? So if you can kind of label them, it's easier to deal with them. You just say, I'm stressed. Okay, what are the stressors? Well, I'm stressed because I have kids and they have soccer practice, they have this and this and this. That's one kind of stress, schedule stress. But there is physical stress. I don't get enough sleep. There's physical. Sometimes you can't get. Sometimes you just have to go to some meeting and go to some march, and sometimes you can't sleep. I mean, it's reality. So I have sleep stress. I have this stress. But there are some things. Sometimes we forget about the stressors that we need to name, which you did a good job, I think, of naming them, and I think that maybe help you in your mind and your heart, because you're saying these, this is my people and they're getting killed off. There's genocide, or they're having cultural removal. So these kind of moral stress, because this is not right and I can't fix it. That's a moral stress. And sometimes those need more than exercise and stuff. They need some processing. When do we angry at God or we angry at somebody, and we need to write those things down and we need to process that moral stress. Sometimes intellectual stress, like, why is this and this, they both seem true, but they can't both be true. You have this kind of thing where your brain just doesn't work because you can't put two things together. Why would US do this when China's doing this? That's moral stress, but also just intellectual stress. So there's things, these assaults on our body that we need to, I think it helps to label them. But yes, it is a long road, and we need to draw on those. We need to draw on those resources that don't run out. That's why, like I said, drugs, alcohol, addictions are not helpful, because they run out. You draw on them, they help you, but then they run out right away. So when you're talking about long-term management, you got to pick the healthy things, the healthy foods, which can make a big difference. Now, these things they're not like, this is hopeless, I just need to eat. But no, these are huge. If you eat a healthy, fruits and vegetables, and a balanced diet and not too many sugars, that's actually a very, very different effect on your brain and your body than eating unhealthy. And exercise also very, very different and make you much more functional. None of these things are going to make you into a superhuman. Okay, we all going to be humans in the end. Okay, so we have to realize that as well, and we can't overstretch ourselves. So we all have to have limits. We have our boundaries. We have to make our boundaries and have limits, and acknowledge that I'm only a human being. I can only do so much, and my family can only do so much. And sometimes I'm guessing you and your family are the highest achieving. Your kids might not make it to your level. That's okay. All right. We have to be understanding of people who cannot do everything we can do. And I'm seeing a question on here that, is it okay if I go into this one? Some of the weaker, older generations may force their kids into something. You might not be able. They might not rise to that level. It's just the way it is. Other people might not be what we want them to be in every way, and we have to be able to manage that as well. And not. I mean, we should push people. That there's nothing wrong with that, but in a balanced way that says we are human beings. We are flesh and blood. We are not superheroes. We can't do everything. There's a couple thoughts on that.
Thank you so much for that long answer. And yes, regarding your most recent question and answer, yes, a little older generation, they grew up with not trusting the Chinese police, not trusting the government, not trusting the doctors. So they had that mentality of, therapists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, they won't understand us. They're not in our shoes. They didn't lost their parents. They didn't suffer like us. How can they help us if they are not in our shoes? That kind of attitude, I think the younger generation are a little more acceptance, accept they accept more reaching out for help. But the older generation is just at some level adjusted to genocide, unfortunately, and at some level, some of them are hopeless, like there's not much we can do, and some of them are like, that's why telling their kids to there's not much you can do, which
Mm.
is opposite of what we want as an
Mhm.
activist, as an
Mhm.
association. We want our youth to be aware of what's going on so they can be more patriotic, they can be more think about their people, humanity, and those values, and raise up with those so they can do something for their people. So it's hard to balance for us as well.
Mhm.
Hopefully it will, by time things will change, nothing lasts forever. This suffering will end one day. I do believe in that. But when is the question?
Mhm.
Most of us are unfortunately psychologically, physically, mentally, emotionally very down, but we're trying. And that's when we need our community. When we see
Yes.
each other, we share our pain, we cry together, we laugh together, and that's how we try to survive. But some youth, some people are still think there's a lot of political things going on in the community, so we should stay away. Otherwise, our family will pay the price. So it's like a circle going on. So I want to go. Probably it's 12:55. We have only 5 minutes, and I'm going to read the one last question. Here's the question. At what point should a person reach out to a medical professional when they are experiencing unexplained physical symptoms and recognize that they are under high stress? At what
Yeah.
level we should take medicines and we should reach out and
Right. I think it's not wrong. It's really not wrong at any level. If you have some physical symptoms, you don't know what's happening, it's not wrong to go to see the medical people and say, "Hey, what's happening to me? Can you check on me?" Um, I haven't seen that generally be a problem. Sometimes there's a problem when you go, again, go over and over, or you get test after test after test, and really the original problem is not being addressed, which is the stress. Um, and our if our system is not very good at that. We don't have a lot of counselors in the medical system, probably not enough, and um, we have a tendency, kind of a you don't every time you go, you might see a different person, and so every time that new person will start over with, okay, got to make sure it's not this, make sure it's not a heart attack, make sure it's not a stroke, make sure it's not this dangerous things. So it's good to go, but with the balance, I would say, with the understanding that, okay, the stress part, I might need to go to someone else for that at the same time. I might need to see the counselor or a clergy or a holistic medicine person or something where I can work on both things at once. Um, or, a gym coach sometimes can be. Um, so I think it's when do you go? If you have the question, like, I'm not sure if I should go to the medical person, well, it's probably time to go, right? And answer the question, at least probable. And that's why I say suggest asking the question, is this likely my stress, or is it likely my physical body? Do I have an infection or something? And ask that question that way and get that kind of answer. If they say, oh, it's probably your stress, then it's time to focus on something else.
thank you. I'm checking. I think most of questions were answered. There were a couple others, but it looks like we don't have a lot of timing. I want to respect others' time so they can go back to work. I think some of our listeners are during their lunch break. So
Right.
I would like to thank you, Dr. Bunge, for your time and for looking into this and helping our people to overcome their stress. And and also for the listeners, we hope that we can have a Dr. Bunge again for other series of our seminars. This recording will be posted, and also you can reach out to the slides. If you need any help with your personal journey, feel free to reach us out. Visit our website, which is UighurWellnessInitiative.org. You can also reach us out with our social media channels and Facebook and Instagram. We'll try our best to get back to you with your questions, or organize, seminars like this based on your needs. And again, thanks for everyone. Let's meet on our next seminar. Take care.